Chapter 576. My chest burned with every breath I took. The pain was unbearable. It almost felt as though I was breathing fire, but keep breathing. The familiar voice and hand pressing against my back prompted me to keep breathing in the same manner as before. It was hard. Very hard. In the process of dropping the boulders into the hole, I almost passed out from overexertion. It would have been catastrophic if Han Yufei hadn't dragged me away and hidden me in a corner to help me. Fortunately, as this seemed to be a common scene, none of the demons took particular notice of me. You're almost there. Han Yufei's voice echoed out once more. Clenching my teeth, sweat dripped down from the side of my face as it sizzled on the steaming hot ground. Ugh. Despite the pain, I persisted through the pain as I felt myself progressing. A slow but steady increase in strength and recovery was occurring in my muscles. In spite of the fact that I had no mana inside my body was slowly recovering. It was nothing short of miraculous. Don't lose focus. Han Yufei's voice once again echoed inside of my head as he helped me master the first stage of his family martial manual. Body hardening. Compared to the other two sections, it sounded like the most lackluster stage of his martial manual, but I beg to differ. At the moment, I find it to be the most effective method. There was a simple reason for this. With it, I might be able to increase the power and time of my last skill. Limit Breaker. The most ominous skill that I had, but also my biggest reassurance. With every use, I knew that I would have to follow my other self's arrangements, but I also knew that I would be able to live longer through this skill. Especially since I was still quite weak compared to my enemies, and I ended up facing enemies that tended to be way above my rank nowadays. There are 4 phases to the body hardening method: bronze body, silver body, gold body, and diamond body. You've currently achieved the bronze body and you're close to achieving the silver body. If you keep practicing as I told you, then you won't have any problems breaking through to the next level anytime soon. I slowly turned around as I felt Han Yufei's hand leave my body. The sensation of cooling that was coursing through my body vanished at that moment. A pity. I thought as I slowly stood up and stretched my body. How's his condition? Crouching down next to Jean and Emma, who were sitting not so far from where we were, I carefully examined Small Snake's condition. He seems to be fine. Emma replied as she examined his body carefully. Placing her finger over his wrist, she closed her eyes for several seconds. His heartbeat is a bit weak and his complexion is a bit pale, but for now he isn't in any danger. He is just exhausted. That's good. I sighed in relief once I heard her words. As I've said before, it was my responsibility to keep Small Snake alive. I couldn't forgive myself if anything happened to him. Let's get going, Jean said as he stood up and looked toward the distance. The demons are coming. They won't like it if they see us doing nothing. You're right. As I looked into the distance, I saw several demons approaching in our general direction and picked up Small Snake's body. I then placed him over my shoulders. At least they're not overworking us, Han Yufei commented as he stretched his shoulders. I nodded slightly as I turned to face his direction. Yeah. Surprisingly, for a labor camp, the demons were rather lax. Or rather, they weren't stupid to the point of overworking the people here. We were allowed to have short breaks in order to recover our stamina. This was so that they could ensure maximum performance from the people working. The breaks weren't long, about 10 minutes long, but it was still nonetheless something. As we sat on one of the rocks, some of the people from the other races were also taking short breaks and quietly eating some of the strange goo from before. I guess all the deaths over here are mostly from suicide, I thought as I stepped over the corpses beneath me. The rotten feeling still made my stomach churn, but I simply endured it and headed for the far end where the boulders were. Things would have been a lot easier if my mana wasn't blocked, I muttered as I walked. If my mana wasn't sealed, I would have been able to finish my task faster and more efficiently, but apparently the ores inside of the boulders reacted negatively to any form of energy, and hence why our mana was sealed. Kind of bullshit, but it wasn't as though I could do anything about it. Sighing deeply, I walked toward the rocks in the distance with Small Snake on my shoulder. I really want to get out of here. Has everyone placed their hands on Kevin? Melissa impatiently looked at the others and checked whether they had placed their hands on Kevin. It was the necessary condition in order for the teleportation skill to work. Yes. Yup. Ready. Upon confirming that everyone had placed their hands on Kevin, she patted his shoulder. Alright, do your thing. The latest episodes are on website. Kevin's mouth twitched as he felt Melissa's pat. In a soft voice, he whispered, "What am I, a dog?" "Yes." Melissa nodded, clearly overhearing his whisper. Patting Kevin in the head again, she turned to look at the pyramid in the distance and urged, "Now hurry up. We don't have much time." "Fine, fine." With a roll of his eyes, Kevin turned to face the pyramid and pressed the air. His actions caused the others to look at each other with a weird look on their faces. However, it didn't last for long as their visions soon blacked out and they felt a familiar sensation engulf their body. Their bodies slowly disintegrated into particles and they vanished from their spot. Clank. What followed after the all too familiar rock grating sound was complete darkness as I found myself back in my room. HAA. My energy was dwindling as I breathed deeply. My body was completely exhausted and I barely felt any energy inside of my body. Shit. I let out a curse while covering my face with my hand. Now is not the time to rest. After ripping the shirt off my body, I sat cross-legged on the floor. Then I started breathing rhythmically, recalling Han Yufei's previous teachings. There was a time for everything and now was not the time for me to relax. I had to train. If I persevere through the exhaustion and pain as Han Yufei said, my body will continue to improve, and I will soon be able to progress to the next phase of the body hardening method. Imagining how much stronger I would be after learning the skill excited me to no end as my eyes closed shut. Just UW. In that moment, a bright light flashed across the room, forcing me to add more strength to my eyelids that were keeping my eyes closed. Are we here? Why is it so dark? Because the lights are off? Where is my cigarette? A series of familiar voices echoed after the bright light as darkness returned to the room. Huh. My body jumped up in shock as I recognized the voices. What in the world is going on here? So you're saying that you haven't seen any humans here? Several demons prostrated themselves to the ground, not daring to look up as a sinister voice reverberated across a vast expanse. Visit for a better user experience. Why, yes, Your Highness. One of the demons replied as his body shook uncontrollably. It had to be noted that the demon was a Duke-ranked demon, and yet he was trembling like a newborn cub. For him to fear the figure in front of him, it displayed just how powerful the figure was. So not on this planet as well. Observing a large pyramid-shaped structure in the distance, Magnus massaged the bottom of his chin. This marks another planet that has no humans inside. Thinking of His Majesty's orders, Magnus couldn't help but doubt whether there truly were any humans on any of the mentioned planets. But as his faith in Jezebeth was high, he didn't question his orders. I have no choice but to continue to fulfill his orders. Is there anything else that you would like to know? The same demon from before spoke. Lowering his head and carefully scrutinizing the demon, Magnus showed a surprised look. Oh. A thin smile spread across his face. Normally, I don't like it when people talk without my permission, but since I'm in a good mood today, let's see what your next response is. The surrounding area was enveloped in deathly silence as the demons began to tremble uncontrollably. Especially the demon that had previously spoken as he felt the humongous presence coming out of Magnus, and heading in his direction. A thick killing intent permeated through the air as Magnus' eyes shined with a red hue. I will try to answer to the best of my abilities. The Duke-ranked demon knew from that moment that his next words would decide his life or death as he swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Good. Magnus nodded as he brought his hands behind his back. What clan are you from? All the demons present froze on the spot following his words. It was especially obvious on the Duke-ranked demon who trembled uncontrollably. It was a simple question, yet the implications behind it were massive. It had to be noted that killing a demon of Duke rank from another clan was the equivalent of waging war against them. Magnus was simply threading on a thin wire. After slowly raising his head to gaze at Magnus, the demon replied. I'm from the clan of Pride. Pride clan? Magnus' brow raised. You from the Pride clan? A chuckle escaped from his lips as he shook his head. It wasn't long before his face twisted. Even though you know that you belong to my clan, you behave as if you have no shred of pride inside of your body. It became increasingly difficult to breathe as every word he spoke bore down on everything around him, forcing the demon to lower their heads even further. Pathetic. With a swipe of his hand, the Duke-ranked demon turned into dust. Turning his body to face the distance, Magnus' fingers flicked in the air and a fissure appeared in front of him. Casaria, was it? Magnus slowly entered the fissure. I hope you won't disappoint me. Chapter 577. Bang. A powerful blast reverberated through a large room as a figure skidded back. Cough, cough. What followed after the blasting sound was a series of coughs as the dust in the air settled, revealing a figure with long black hair and yellow eyes. Cough, he. Liam smiled as he wiped his mouth and noticed the smudge of blood on his thumb. That was pretty strong. What is another human doing here? An effeminate-looking humanoid with 2 curly horns floated in the air opposite Liam. While levitating in the air, the demon licked his lips slowly as he gazed at Liam. Now that I'm getting a closer look at you, you're quite the handsome lad. Shivers ran down Liam's body as he felt the gaze of the demon. What's going on? What prompted the shivers wasn't the demon's weird gaze but something else. Something deeper. It was his sixth sense. Something he had honed over countless battles and struggles. At the moment, it was telling him that something was wrong with the situation. His instinct was right as he felt a sharp whistling sound coming from his right cheek. It was there that Liam noticed the demon appearing right beside him. It had only taken a short second for him to appear next to Liam and attack him. Fast. Liam thought as his eyes gleamed with a strange yellow hue and lightning began to crackle around his body. Clay. A metallic ring echoed throughout the air as the demon's sharp nails came into contact with the sheath of Liam's sword that was only slightly tilted to the right. Even then, cough. Skidding several meters back, Liam coughed again. This time, blood came out of his mouth as his knee trembled and he was forced to stab his sword to the ground in order to stop himself from crashing against the nearby wall. How powerful. Lifting his head up to gaze at the demon, Liam clenched and unclenched his fist as he placed the sheath of the sword next to his waist. Massaging the side of his neck, he quietly mumbled to himself. As I thought, fighting against a marquee-ranked demon while I'm still rank isn't suitable. In the meantime, the demon was carefully observing Liam. You're pretty strong, the demon commented. Raising his head to stare at the demon, Liam lowered his heads. Thank you. Kiki. The demon chuckled as the wings on his back folded together. He then extended his hand. Continuing this fight is pointless. You're weaker than me and you know that. It would be a pity to let such talent die, so... The demon's hand was suddenly enshrouded in a black hue as a scroll unexpectedly materialized on the top of his palm. How about signing a co? Visit for a better user experience. I'm good. Liam cut the demon off before he could even finish speaking. Taking a glance at the contract, he shook his head. I appreciate your offer, but I'd rather not sign a contract with a demon belonging to the Lust clan. Tapping onto his dimensional space, an apple appeared in Liam's hand. Crunch. When he bit into the apple, juice spilled on the ground as an echoing crunching sound was heard. You guys are rather... weak. Munch. I would much rather sign a contract with a Munch demon from the Envy clan. Munch, of course, that is only on the premise that I'm interested to sign one in the fur. Much, he place. Munch, but I'm not. Licking his fingers after having devoured the apple in his hand, Liam stretched his neck. Good snack. He then placed his hand on the sheath of his sword. Alright, I'm ready. Haha. After Liam finished his words, the demon let out a small laugh as he covered his face with the hand that was holding onto the contract. Ha 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 ha. The laugh soon turned into a full maniacal laugh as the demon pressed his stomach and hunched over. By the second, his laughter became louder and a frown appeared on Liam's face. What's so funny? Liam asked with a confused tone. Following his words, the demon stopped laughing and his face twisted. Your naivety. Fwop. The back of his wings expanded rapidly and a terrifying aura suddenly sprang out from the demon's body as the room started to shake. To think that there would be someone stupid enough to reject my offer and choose to die like this. His menacing pressure reached all the way toward Liam, who felt his clothes and hair flutter. Within a couple of seconds, the pressure had already expanded toward every inch and corner of the room as the demon's terrifying pressure continued to expand. I'll show you exactly what happens when someone rejects me. The figure vanished from the spot before reappearing right in front of Liam. Click. A clicking sound echoed throughout the room. Thump. Everything happened so fast that no one was able to react to the sudden changes. After that, with two loud thuds, a dissected body landed on the ground in front of Liam, who picked his ear with his pinky. "You talk too much," he mumbled under his breath as he let the sword fall into its sheath. After that, he kicked the demon's body and flipped it around. How? It was there that he heard the demon's voice as he stared at Liam with eyes wide open. Given that his core had still not been shattered, he was still alive. "How did I defeat you?" Tilting his head, Liam brushed his hair back. With a shrug of his shoulder, as he replied, "Since I couldn't beat you when I was ranked, I just decided to rank up. Visit for a better user experience." His words caused the demon's eyes to open even more. Shrugging his shoulders once again, Liam's yellow eyes shined and he stabbed toward the demon's abdomen area. Crack. A cracking sound echoed out and the demon's body slowly disintegrated into the air. "All right." Stretching his shoulder a little, he turned around and headed toward the far end of the room, where he was met with another dark corridor. As he slowly walked in that direction, his footsteps halted and he lowered his head. He suddenly recalled something. Did I break the cores of the two demons that were standing outside? A frown emerged on his face as he deeply thought about the situation. Ugh. But after wrapping his head over the matter and being unable to recall anything, he eventually ruffled his hair and continued to head deeper into the tunnel. Whatever, it'll be more fun this way. It'll help me test my new strength. Now that he had broken through to rank, he felt a lot more powerful and he couldn't wait to test his new strength. Blinking several times to make sure that I was hearing correctly, I picked my nose with my pinky. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything wrong with my hearing. Am I that far gone after all that training? It may have been dark, but the small familiar light coming from what seemed to be a cigarette and the smell. Leopold. I instinctively called out. Hey. But not expecting a reply, I flinched and took several steps back. What's going off? Stopping mid-sentence, I felt something soft embrace me. My thought process halted for a short second. I'm glad you're okay. A faint whisper sounded near my ear, causing my body to shiver as a strange feeling enveloped me. What's happening? I can't see shit. It was then that a familiar voice echoed and Amanda distanced herself from me. Following that, my eyes reflexively closed as a bright light flooded the room. Ring. A voice called out for me. I could easily make out that the voice belonged to Kevin as I slowly opened my eyes and saw several figures standing in front of me. So many. Taking note of reverting that was present, I opened and closed my mouth, speechless. Just how many people got transported in this place? Kevin, Melissa, Ryan, Amanda, Angelica, Leopold, Hein, and Ava. Excluding the others that were with me, practically almost everyone was here with me. How did this happen? I asked as I turned to look at Kevin, who shook his head with a bitter smile. I also don't know. I lowered my head to ponder over the situation. But just as I was about to speak my thoughts, I heard Melissa's sour voice. This place is pretty fragile. Knock. Melissa turned to look at me as she knocked on the side of the wall. Although they aren't exactly weak, given your strength, you should have been able to easily break the walls. How come you didn't escape? Everybody moved to the wall and felt it for themselves as soon as they heard her words. You're right. It's true. This is indeed pretty weak. Everyone turned to look at me as they confirmed her words. I wryly smiled and extended my hand. It would have been easy for me had I been in my normal conditions, but as you can see, my mana is sealed. I can't really do anything right now. Let me see. Grabbing me by the wrist, Melissa channeled her mana into my body as a hue came out of her body. She then closed her eyes. In that moment, everyone's eyes were directed in her direction, trying to see what she was doing. I did feel an uncomfortable stare coming from a certain direction, but I promptly ignored it. It was nothing big. Seconds passed and Melissa eventually opened her eyes. Her brows furrowed tightly. He's not lying. Covering her mouth with her hand, she had a thoughtful look on her face before she turned my wrist and started patting my body all over. Whoa. Her sudden actions startled me as I tried to move my body back. Stop moving. But grasping my wrist, Melissa stopped me from moving and continued patting my body all over. Her actions caught everyone off guard. I took particular notice of Angelica's actions as she covered Ryan's eyes with her hands. "Hey, what are you doing? I want to see." To make matters worse, the stare from before became more intense as the back of my neck suddenly turned cold. "Give me a break," I thought to myself as Melissa's cold hands continued to pat me around the body. Had it not been for the fact that she was currently a lot stronger than me, I would have already pushed her back by now. "Alright, let me check your blood." Fortunately, her session of sexual harassment didn't last for long as she distanced herself away from me and took a small device from her dimensional space. It may have not been too bright, but the moment Melissa took the device out, I was able to instantly catch sight of what seemed to be a sharp needle. A bright smile adorned Melissa's face as she beckoned me to come to her. "Come, Rin. Let me test your blood." I took a step back as I took note of her expression. "Melissa, can we talk about this?" Chapter 578. It's as I thought. Melissa stood up and walked in my direction. When I saw her figure walk up to me, I backed up. I was a little apprehensive about her. Recalling the earlier scenes that I wished to forget, I raised both hands and hugged my body. "What do you want? What's with that look? You think I'm going to assault you or something?" "Yes." I nodded my head. "Yes." I repeated to make sure she understood. "Well, I'm not, so chill out." Melissa rolled her eyes. Taking out a chair, she sat close to me and showed me the device she used to test my blood. Pointing toward a certain section, she spoke. "Your blood seems to be contaminated by something extremely concentrated and powerful. It's probably why your mana is sealed." Tilting the device in her hand, Melissa had a thoughtful look on her face. Taking off her glasses, Melissa switched them for another pair and tapped on their side. There was a small red light that shot from the middle of the glasses and headed for the device in her hand. Carefully examining the device in her hand, her face changed after a while. "I see," she softly muttered as she put away the device and looked at me. "By chance, did you experience some sort of paralysis effect when you first appeared here?" Surprised, I looked at Melissa. "How did you know?" "It's as I suspected." Instead of answering me, Melissa stood up from her seat and turned to look at Kevin. "Remember what I mentioned to you before?" "Yeah." Kevin nodded as he turned to look at me. His brows furrowed tightly. "Is it the same plants that you mentioned?" "Sort of." Taking 2 different plant samples out of her dimensional space, Melissa nodded. There seemed to be other compounds mixed in his bloodstream, but in general, the 2 main ingredients are indeed the ones that I previously discovered. "Can you heal him?" Kevin asked. As she stared at the device in her hand, Melissa shook her head. "No, not yet. I'll need some time in order to figure out how to remove the effect of the mixture from his blood." "What?" As I alternated between Kevin and Melissa, I didn't quite understand what they were trying to do. However, seeing their serious faces, I knew they were trying to help me. "How long do you need?" "The latest episodes are on website. Kevin asked, leaning against the side of the wall. His complexion was quite serious. Melissa scratched the back of her head and lifted her glasses. "A couple of hours?" she muttered after a couple of seconds. Her words instantly prompted the others to look at each other with some concern in their eyes. Their reactions caught me off guard as I couldn't help but ask. "A couple of hours doesn't seem like much, why the long faces? Were they afraid that the demons would find them?" "That's impossible." I shook my head. At the moment, Melissa and the others had hidden any traces of themselves thanks to some weird gadget that they were wearing. This was so that the demons wouldn't notice their sudden appearance in the room. Further adding to that, they also seemed to have sealed a bit of their mana, so I doubted that the demons would even notice their appearance. The soundproof barrier that Kevin created also blocked sound from coming out, so there really shouldn't be any reason for them to be worried about time. "If you need a couple of hours, then I don't think it will be much of a problem. The room doors won't open until..." "That's not it." Angelica suddenly cut in. Confused, I turned to look at her, and it was then that I noticed her sour expression. I immediately had an ominous premonition. And I was right to think so, as her next words made my stomach churn. "The reason we were forced to come here to you is because the human you last recruited decided to go into the mana compressor by himself and is probably fighting against all the demons on his own. I don't think it will be long before others recognize him and chaos will ensue." "Shit." I cursed out loud as I covered my face with my hand. "It's Liam, isn't it?" Angelica did not have to clarify who the individual was since his actions made it clear to me. It was without a doubt Liam. This is exactly why I didn't want to bring Liam with me on this planet. Given his terrible memory and thirst for excitement, this was an expected outcome. I should have seen it coming. The moment I realized Small Snake was here, I should have also realized that Liam would also appear here. Standing beside me, Amanda asked, "What do we do now?" "I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure." I silently muttered as my brows knit. Actually, this situation isn't terrible. Suddenly, Kevin's voice rang out. While silently mumbling to himself, he walked toward the room's door and gently touched it. Breaking through the door and getting free should be no problem for any of us. For now, before the alarms ring, we should wait here and try our best to get into our best conditions. Ah. Realization dawned on me as I immediately understood Kevin's intentions. You want to take advantage of the chaos to directly go to where the main operating board of the mana compressor is so that we can destroy it. Yes. Visit for a better user experience. Kevin nodded as his fist gently touched the door of the room. Our priority should be destroying the mana compressor. Once we destroy it, I won't have trouble getting all of us away from this place. Right. For a moment I almost forgot our mission, which was to destroy the mana compressor. We didn't need to escape in the first place, rather it was the complete opposite we needed to destroy. All right. Nodding my head in understanding, I sat down on the ground and turned to look at Melissa, who was busy sorting out her equipment. I agree with your plan. For now, I'll just wait for Melissa to do her thing. The faster she is, the better the situation. Taking note of what I said, Melissa shifted her head slightly and glared at me. What am I? Your dog. You only just realized? I looked at her with a strange look. From the magic cards to all the theories I have given you, you should already know what you are by now. Ha ha ha. Melissa covered her mouth as she laughed. The sound of her laughter echoed throughout the room and was extremely pleasing to the ear. Of course, only the sound was pleasant, the vibe was nothing short of pleasant. Meanwhile, while Melissa laughed, Amanda appeared behind Melissa. Standing up, Melissa pulled her sleeves up and furiously charged in my direction. I'll kill you. Help. Attempted homicide. Seeing her charge at me like an enraged bull, I stood and hid behind Kevin. Kevin, help me. I'm going to die if you don't do anything. Honestly, at this point you deserve whatever is coming to you. Well, that's mean. Let go of me, Amanda. Amanda, who had already been expecting the situation, stood behind Melissa and held her by both armpits, stopping her charge. Let go. I won't kill him. In spite of Melissa's curses and shouts, she never let go. I promise I won't kill him. I'm only going to make him stop breathing forever. That's the same thing. I thought to myself as I rested my arm on Kevin's shoulder. Turning to glance at him, I softly whispered. She must be in her period. Just stop. Within the mana compressor's peak, there was a greenish human figure sitting inside a relatively luxurious room. With long white hair falling behind his back and wrinkles all over his face, Duke Icaron slowly opened his eyes, revealing a set of red pupils that menacingly shone within the room. Who? While exhaling, he expelled turbid air. Lowering his head to stare at his wrinkled hands, a purplish dark hue manifested on his hands before quickly turning paler and disappearing. I don't have much time left. Duke Icaron stood up, folding his hand into a fist, revealing a lanky figure almost entirely composed of bones. There was an obvious frailty to his figure as there was barely any skin on his body. Duke Icanor shook his head as he stared at his figure in the mirror standing at the opposite end of the room. If only I had more time. The latest understudies are on website. With a swipe of his hand, a black tunic with golden embroidery materialized on his body. How unfortunate, had I not been forced to take care of this place, I may have been able to break through. Having lived for over 500 years, Duke Icaron was now on the verge of death. His imminent death was due to natural causes. Living past his life expectancy, he didn't have much time left before he would close his eyes for good. He could feel his strength disappearing with each day that passed, and right now he wasn't even confident he could manifest the same strength he used to in the past. Taking another deep breath, Duke Icanor headed for his desk and sat down. There his eyes paused on a small bracelet and a couple of rings. Extending his hand, he held the items close to him and examined them. A black hue sprang forth from his hand as he tried to look through the items, but he soon shook his head. I can't seem to open them. Bang! The door of the room suddenly burst open. What's going on? Duke Ikenor abruptly stood up. How dare you barge into M? We have an emergency. A demon rushed into the room. There was clear panic on his face as he searched for the Duke. An emergency? Duke Ikenor's rage quickly quelled, especially after he noticed the panicked complexion of the demons that had just entered. He quickly realized that something was going on. What's going on? An intruder has infiltrated the premises. Huh? Duke Ikenor's head recoiled back in surprise. An intruder? Just one. Yes. The demon nodded, prompting Duke Ikenor's face to change once again. Just one. Is he trying to have himself killed? It had to be noted that there were thousands of demons inside the mana compressor, including him, a Duke-ranked demon. For someone to try to infiltrate the place alone, he must either be extremely reckless or strong. But as Duke Ikenor closed his eyes and tried to feel for any strong presence, he couldn't feel anyone that was remotely close to the Duke-ranked level. This only meant one thing: the intruder was weaker than him. How bold! As he glared in a particular direction, a powerful aura suddenly erupted from his body. It looks like people have started thinking that I'm an easy target just because I'm close to my death. Turning to face the closest demon, the Duke ordered. Lock the entrances of the compressor. Sound the alarm and get all the other demons alert. We don't want to suffer too many losses. Understood. The demon replied with his back straight. Good. Nodding his head, Duke Ikenor stepped forward and vanished from his spot. I'll see exactly who has the balls to mess with me. Chapter 579. After pacing around and gazing at the doors to the rooms for a while, Exilian suddenly halted. Strange. He muttered as he walked toward one of the rooms and placed his hand on the door. Sensing that there was only a person inside, he slowly let go. Nothing. Not too long ago he felt a strange fluctuation coming from that room, but he didn't see anything strange when he checked it out. There's a good chance I'm overthinking this. Folding his wings behind his back, Exilian continued to pace around the rooms. Another room soon caught his eye as he walked. Walking up to it and placing his hand over it, a smile cracked on his face. It looks like he won't last for long. Feeling the weak heartbeat of the human inside, Exilian knew that he was almost as good as dead. Should I tell them of his death or pretend he didn't die and tell them that they will only be able to see him at the end of the month once the work is completed? Imagining the look on their faces when they realize they have been fooled. Kiki. Exilian chuckled out loud. The more he thought about the faces that humans would make when they learned that their comrade had died, the more his face twisted. What's so funny? Another voice echoed at that moment, and a demon slowly walked toward Exilian. He was Impetus, the other demon in charge of overlooking the cells. Nothing. Waving his hand at Impetus, Exilian stopped smiling and leaned against the side of the wall. Judging from your reaction, I don't think it's nothing. Well, it's nothing big. Knock. Knock. As he knocked on the door next to him, Exilian gave him a brief overview of what he thought. He's about to die, and I was just thinking of how I could mess with the other humans. Oh. A smile cracked on Impedious's face as he showed an impressed look. You call that nothing? It sounds a lot more entertaining than the other things I'm doing. Kiki. That's probably because you're soon going to be promoted. You don't have much time to think of these trivial matters as you used to in the past. Shing. A bright light appeared on Impedious' lower waist just as he was about to reply, and the two demons changed their faces. An emergency. They both simultaneously thought as Impedious took out a small black orb from his waist and casually crushed it in his hand. Crack. Moments after the orb was crushed, purple flames rose in the air, and a series of words manifested in front of the two demons. Visit for a better user experience. Intruder emergency. Reallocate the workers in the emergency vault. The demons stared at each other for a few seconds before rapidly rushing into action as they tried to figure out how to respond to the sudden message. Make it quick. After that, both demons went their separate ways and headed for a different door each and opened up the rooms. Terror. Terror. A rock grating sound echoed out loud as the rooms slowly started opening. Plop. Plop. Everyone focused their attention on the tools in front of Melissa as a bubbling sound echoed throughout the room. How much longer? I asked. Removing the tube from the burner, Melissa shook the solution and glimpsed at me from the corner of her eyes. Half an hour at most. It might be faster if you stop speaking. Focusing her attention back on the mixture, she silently whispered. You think it's easy to find a solution to your problem when I've only handled the plants for like a day? I know I'm a genius, but I'm no god. Well, she isn't wrong. Shaking my head, I sat down on the ground next to Amanda. How many days have passed since you arrived in this world? About a week. Amanda replied with a look filled with concern. Her concerns were understandable. Suddenly disappearing from the face of the human domain, her parents must be extremely worried about her condition. It was then that I suddenly had a thought. Turning to look at Amanda, I asked, You think they will think that you've come with me? No. Amanda shook her head. My thoughts were contradicted by her increased pitch at the end of her sentence. Ugh. Thinking about Edward possibly busting my ass after we returned back to the human domain suddenly made me not want to go back anymore. I think it's best if you return before me. I don't think I'll be able to come back with you. Glancing at me, Amanda smiled and didn't say anything. My brows furrowed when I saw her reaction. Oi, why do I suddenly have a bee? Terror. In that moment, I heard a familiar stone grating sound and the doors of the room suddenly opened, much to my and everyone else's shock. What's going on? Kevin was the first to react as he took out his sword and got into a stance. Visit for a better user experience. Light began to spill into the room, but unlike before, I no longer needed to cover my eyes as my eyes were already adjusted to the light. It wasn't long before the door opened, revealing the figure of a demon who stared into the room with eyes wide open. What's going on, Hyuk? Shing. Kevin slashed his sword before the demon could complete his sentence, splitting his figure in half. Thump. Thump. Then, without wasting any time, Kevin extended his hand, engulfing the demon's figure in flames. Soon enough, a core appeared on the floor and Kevin stepped on it. Crack. It looks like we don't have much time. Lifting his head to stare into the distance, Kevin's figure vanished. Where are you going? I called out as I got out of the room. Who are you? A shocked voice echoed in the distance right as I got out of the room. Shing. At that point, I noticed Kevin dissecting another demon that appeared to be opening another door. Crack. Stepping onto the core of the demon, Kevin wiped his forehead. Done. That was fast. Rushing to where Kevin was and staring toward the cracked core on the ground, my brows furrowed. You shouldn't have killed him. You should have questioned him before killing him. Bending down and pinching the shards of the core, I threw them back on the ground. Kevin, you should know better than anyone that we're currently in some unknown territory we have no idea. We can't just move around without any information. About that. You don't have to worry about that. Melissa cut in just as Kevin was about to say something. I turned to face her direction. While still silently glaring in my direction, she tapped on her watch, displaying what seemed to be the structure of the mana compressor in holographic form. This may be a larger version of a mana compressor, but at the end of the day it probably still functions the same as the smaller ones on Earth, so... As Melissa tapped on the holograph and motioned with her hands, the mana compressor expanded before our eyes and she pointed to the second highest level of the pyramid. Visit for a better user experience. This is where we should be going. Is that where the main operating system is located? Amanda asked, to which Melissa nodded her head and pointed beneath the pyramid structure. We should currently be located at the bottom of the pyramid, meaning that we have to go up. Considering that the alarm just rang, the demons are on the move to catch that idiot that Run brought. Hey! Shut up. Melissa glared in my direction. Had it not been for that idiot, we would have come to you with a more solid plan, and things wouldn't be as difficult as now. I can't argue against this. He was right. Had it not been for Liam, things would have indeed been a lot more organized. In any case, beggars couldn't be choosers, and now was not the time for us to argue. Guys, help me open the door. Jolting me out of my thoughts was Kevin's voice as he pointed toward the other doors. Right. Turning to face the half-open door, I glanced in Angelica's direction and asked, Angelica, can you do me a favor and open the door? Me? Yes, You're the only one here that can open the door since you have demonic energy. Given that the doors could only be opened using demonic energy, Angelica was the only one that could open the doors. We could technically break the wall apart with just our strength, but that wouldn't be appropriate as there was a risk of someone getting injured inside. Our mana was sealed after all. Furthermore, I believe that this is where Small Snake is resting, so hurry up. The last time I left him, he wasn't in the best condition. I felt some anxiety as I realized the door was half open and there was no reaction on the other side. Quick. The moment the others heard that Small Snake was the one inside the room, their faces changed. Small Snake is there? So that's where he went. Is he okay? Okay. The same went for Angelica, who hurriedly placed her hand on the side of the door and channeled her energy. A black hue sprang out from her body and completely enshrouded the door. Terror. The doors began to open as a familiar rock grating sound echoed. Suddenly, everyone noticed a sickly figure lying on the ground. His breathing was extremely thin and his complexion was extremely pale. Shit. I cursed out loud as I ran in his direction and called out for him. Small Snake. Small Snake. Small Snake. Chapter 580. Congratulations, Brian. There was a festive mood enveloping a small bar as two figures sat on stools and enjoyed their beers. There was an obvious contrast between the two figures. One was lanky and youthful, while the other was extremely handsome and more mature-looking. Nevertheless, the two seemed to be on good terms with each other. The figures were Brian and Hemlock, his superior. You handled the situation skillfully and obtained connections despite not having any special powers. I can tell that you put a lot of effort into the negotiations. Thanks, Heek. Brian thanked Hemlock as his face flushed. He was clearly drunk at the moment. Not a heavy drinker, eh? Taking a sip of the beer, Hemlock wiped the foam that had accumulated on the top of his lips. His actions instantly attracted the gaze of all the people around them. Not minding the attention one bit, Hemlock put the beer down. Although we have done a good job today, we still have a lot to do. Don't get too complacent. As a good supervisor, it was within his duty to remind Brian that he shouldn't let success get to his head. Yeah. Brian weakly nodded his head as he heard Hemlock's words. He was currently extremely intoxicated, and whether he had truly understood his words or not, Hemlock wasn't sure. Nonetheless, Hemlock smiled. It really is a pity that someone as capable as you has such poor talent. There was genuine pity in his voice as he spoke those words. In the past half-year, Hemlock noticed a dramatic increase in his work efficiency. He could now find all the information he needed within a few seconds of asking Brian. He was that amazing. Brian was thorough and especially fast. This was what made Hemlock like him so much. If only he had been born with more talent. A real pity. While bringing the drink down, he stared through the bar's glass window at the city streets through which he could see white and red lights drift across the streets. How beautiful. Hemlock mumbled silently. His complexion changed as he clutched the drink in his hand. His brows furrowed tightly. But it's truly a pity that this won't last for long. What do you mean? Brian asked as he overheard Hemlock's words. Hemlock shook his head as he stared at Small Snake, who was trying his best to keep himself from passing out. Why do you think that it won't last? Echi. Exhaling, Hemlock raised his beer and took a sip. Smacking his lips together, he asked. What is the rank of the strongest human at the moment? Visit for the best no_underscreen_G experience. Rank. Brian answered. Hemlock nodded his head in response. That's right. The current strongest human in the human domain is rank. Hemlock lowered his hand and placed the beer on the counter. Do you know just how strong the Demon King is? Or the most powerful people outside of humanity are? Not sure. Brian answered. Maybe around rank? We've caught up quite a lot with them. Hemlock scoffed out loud as he shook his head. If you really think that, then that's naive of you. Why? You might not know it since your education isn't the best and you're still quite young, but the Demon King sees rank as nothing in his eyes. They are merely bugs he can squish with a snap of his fingers. Is that so? Heek? Brian's body jumped up and he hiccuped out loud. Waving the drink in his hand, he almost fell off his chair. Watch out. Wah. Hemlock extended his hand and blocked Small Snake's chair. You've got to be more careful. Thank you. Sobering up a little, Brian thanked Hemlock. Hemlock's timely assistance prevented him from falling to the ground. No problem. Hemlock downed his drink and wiped his lips. Refreshing. He let out a satisfied sound. Placing the drink back on the countertop, he stood up from his stool. All right, let's get going now. Wait, I'm not done. Brian waved his drink, which was still only half full. Hemlocks looked at Brian with a strange look. You're going to pass out if you finish that drink. I'll be fine, Heek. Taking another sip of the drink, Brian switched the conversation. Back to what you were saying about the Demon King treating ranks as if they are nothing, doesn't that mean that we're basically screwed? Hemlock's complexion shifted as he heard Brian's words. He quickly sat down back on the stool. Do you think otherwise? No. Brian shook his head repeatedly. If it's exactly as you've said, then we truly are screwed. I don't know when the Demon King will arrive back on Earth, but if we continue progressing at this pace, then humanity will face inevitable extinction soon. Heck, it would even be better to join the demons. At least this way we can stop humanity from going extinct. Yes, yes. Hemlock's face brightened as he nodded his head. You also think so, right? Well, yes. Brian looked at Hemlock with a face that said, isn't it obvious? Haha. Hemlock laughed a little as his shoulders relaxed and he whispered softly. I see that you also agree with me on this matter. Maybe. Thump. Just as Hemlock was about to finish his sentence, he heard a loud thump, and it was then that he spotted Brian's head slumped over the table counter, completely passed out. I knew it. With a shake of his head, Hemlock took out his wallet and placed a couple of bills on the counter. Then grabbing Brian by the shoulder, he brought him out of the bar. As he walked toward the exit of the bar, he turned his head to glance at Brian. Opening his mouth, he silently mumbled. Maybe, just maybe, you will understand what I'm trying to do. Drip. Drip. Opening his eyes, Small Snake woke up to a familiar sight and sound. Darkness and the dripping sound coming from the corner of the room. Itchy, itchy. Breathing in and out, Small Snake felt extremely weak. Raising his hand to touch his forehead, he realized that it was boiling hot. Shit, I've got a fever. This familiar sensation that he had been feeling since childhood. Without a doubt he had had a fever. Wiping the sweat from the side of his face, Small Snake carefully sat up straight. Itchy, itchy. As he heavily gulped for air, Small Snake found the world around him spinning as he felt lightheaded. This is bad. Not only was the world around him spinning, but his heart was also beating faster as he could hear it reverberate throughout the silent room. Buff, thump, buff, thump. Make it stop. It was honestly driving him crazy as he hunched over his knees and covered his head with his hands. Soon his body began to shake and sweat dripped down his face all the way to the ground. It hurts. While his teeth chattered, Small Snake hugged his body even more tightly as the pain in his body increased. Time flew by and Small Snake's condition started to worsen and his eyes started to become more and more hollow. As he gradually let go of his knees, he could no longer feel any energy inside of his body. Help. Someone help me. He couldn't even speak. Here. Just then, in the midst of his despair, Small Snake heard the sound of the doors opening, and bright light spilled through the narrow gaps. The moment the light spilled in, Small Snake instinctively closed his eyes. It hurts, he thought as dread started to encapsulate him. He knew that he couldn't work in the conditions that he was in, and he would only be a burden to Ren. Once his thought paused there, Small Snake had a sudden thought. Should I just give up? He was useless. Ever since coming here, Small Snake had been unable to help Ren at all. It was then that he came to a realization, and that was that he was only dragging Ren and the others down. His weak talent was holding the others down. I knew it. I should just give up. Slowly the light that was spilling from the narrow gaps of the door started to dim as a soft smile spread across Small Snake's face. It was at that moment that Small Snake could tell that he was close to dying. Rather than being sad about it, he felt relieved. Maybe this is for the best. His death would allow Ren and the others to have an easier time for when they would escape. If that was the case, then Small Snake felt no regrets. Or rather, there was one, but he knew that it was now no longer possible for him to fulfill it. Achoo! Letting out a small sound, darkness slowly invaded Small Snake's sight. Small Snake. Small Snake. Small Snake. Just as the darkness was about to completely swallow his consciousness whole, Small Snake heard a couple of familiar voices call out for him. There was Rin, Angelica, Hein, Leopold, and Ryan. Ah, I hope they will be fine without me looking after them. Those were his last thoughts before his consciousness slipped and darkness enveloped his vision. Small snake.